Today, as we were going through the teacher handbook, I was in a particular group that was going through the teacher handbook part on planning. And I saw this section, and I put it in this morning because I thought it was quite interesting. Because what we're going to be doing over the next 3 years is not something new. Really what we're going to be doing is actualizing the requirements that BFS has for us as teachers. We're going to be making sure that our Stage 1 and Stage 2 UVDs, the end goals of our units, and the assessments that determine if students have developed mastery are meeting the expectations of quality that we have at BFS. I want to give you just another general overview of our calendar for this year. I have been so impressed that many of you have already begun creating Stage 1s for some of your unit plans, but I do want to reiterate, this first quarter is really all about learning how to make effective Stage 1 UVDs. Because if we don't learn how to make them effectively, we're just going to see it as something to check off a box. It's not going to be valuable, it's not going to be quality, and more importantly, it's not going to be effective for our students. So this entire quarter is dedicated for us learning how to make these meaningful and effective. Some of you have approached me about setting up times for me to sit with you and walk you through this process. I am absolutely happy to do so, and I do want to let you know that I'm going to be very consistent in treating you all differently. Because what Dawn is doing is different than what Sarah's going to be doing in her classroom. What Justin's going to be doing in English is going to be different than what Jocelyn's doing in her classroom. And so I'm going to meet you where you're at, and I'm going to be relying on you as the experts in your field. And as this first quarter is going on, I would plead with you, tell me what you need for this to be successful for you. What resources do you need, and how can I help with this process? And maybe what are some things that I'm not considering to make this successful? And the whole point of this 3-year process, as John Hattie would say, is that learning is optimized when teachers see learning through the eyes of the learner, and when students see themselves as their own teachers. Our question here at BFS is not, are our kids learning? Anything we do results in learning for our students. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how can we get our students to learn the most in the least amount of time? And when we can take that backwards planning philosophy from understanding by design, and when we can transfer that into a document, not only does that force us to go through and put ourselves in the mind of our students and how they learn and the end goals that they're going to have, but when we use this in our classes, it creates a clear target that students can hit, which allows them to develop the metacognitive skills to be their own teachers and to assess themselves on how are they doing in terms of mastering those end unit goals. Now, before we begin our workshop on essential questions and enduring understandings, which I think are the most difficult part of understanding Stage 1 UVDs, I do want to briefly talk about standards and the idea of mastery. The standards that we all have are usually just created federally or maybe with a particular organization to determine here's what students should know or be able to do. And what we are doing when we pick particular standards for our units is we are going to teach those standards to mastery, which means that students have internalized that learning and, more importantly, can demonstrate transfer of that learning, which means that they can apply it in a new context. We all know that within the Society of Korea, students are very, very good at recall, and they're very, very good at drill and kill. But when we put them in a situation when they're supposed to take that knowledge and it's not formatted in a way that they're familiar with, that transfer is what's lacking. I was talking with a math teacher this week, and we were looking through one of their unit plans, and they had 8 standards that they had noted in this unit. And I said, well, how many of these standards are you actually teaching to mastery? And when we looked at those standards, we actually cut it down to 5 of those 8 standards. Now those other 3 that were really going to be taught to mastery later in the year, those can be put into knowledge or but we're not teaching some of those skills to mastery. And the important thing, and the reason why we need to be very meticulous and careful about the standards we choose when we're thinking about mastery, is because we need to create a target that is very clear, that our students can hit, and they can see that every day they're in class, they're working toward these end goals. Again, we want our learners to see themselves as their own teachers. So that being said, we're going to be starting our workshop today, and our workshop has 2 major goals. The first is to identify characteristics of enduring understandings and essential questions. Yes, we have all accessed a resource that gave a very technical, jargon-heavy definition of enduring understandings and essential questions, but that's not really demonstrating that we have transfer, that we have demonstrated that we've mastered what these are. And so what we're going to be doing today is really creating our own adapted definitions of these 2 terms that will be used to guide us throughout the next 3 years. And we're going to have a little bit of fun in assessing some sample enduring understandings and essential questions. We're going to see if we can take that understanding of those characteristics and apply them to a few exemplar enduring understandings and essential questions. So this is the process that we're going to be going through, and then I will stop talking. So we're going to be placed into groups of about 5 to 6. I have already organized these groups because each group is going to contain members that have various degrees of experience creating or using an understanding by design curricular framework. The first thing you're going to do when you get in that group is you are going to individually identify what are characteristics of enduring understandings and essential questions, and what are not characteristics of enduring understandings and essential questions. And you're going to be using the handouts that you received when you came into the room to do that. So everyone already has access to that. So when you get with your groups individually, what are characteristics of enduring understandings and essential questions, and what are not characteristics of them? Then, in your small group, then we're all going to come back together, and you are going to share what you have and create a common list that reflects things that everyone had said, and we're going to put that on our big post-it note that are at some of the tables. So we already have 6 tables ready to go. Now you don't have to list on this big post-it note inaccurate characteristics of enduring understandings and essential questions, just what are those characteristics. So we're going to just take it from there, and then once we're done with that, we'll move on to our next step.